Hello, so in today's video I want to show you my calendar, which I've just had printed and I'm rather proud of, and also talk you through what you need to know if you want to make a custom calendar yourself, because there are one or two things that now I've done it I wish I'd known before. Now, there are lots of companies that offer making calendars. Nearly all of them aren't the commercial ones that you buy are normally kind of that size and they're stitched, and I found it was very difficult to find anywhere that would produce ones like that. There were one or two, but I wasn't sure of the quality, so I didn't go for them. Much more commonly you'll get either A4 or A3 with a ring binder like these, and then your image they all supply the calendar part. Sometimes you get a choice, sometimes you don't. I quite liked the layout and the lettering of this one. And so you provide the image that goes there. So there are a couple of things to take into consideration. One is the proportions. Now I realised when I came to putting my images together I wanted to use, that I don't often use this format, which is 2 by 3, going that way. I'm much more likely to do square, or I do, like the size of the whole piece. But I did have some, and also some of the others I've adapted digitally to fit into the space. So that's one thing to bear in mind. I think because they're mostly designed for photographs, and photographs tend to be in that format. But the company that I used, and there's no sponsorship or anything, was one called Contrado, and that's much more geared up for doing art, but it's still that format. So that's something to bear in mind, whether you've got images that work in that ratio. And what I decided to do, and I'm going to illustrate this by, if you look down, you see I decided to get one printed first, although it was quite expensive because the fewer you have, the more it costs, plus you're paying the postage. And I'm so glad I did, because I realised something, and you need to know about something called bleed. Now, I've also written a blog post about this because I think it's quite useful to have the information that you can refer back to, so I'll link to that below and maybe on the screen as well. Bleed is something that's used in the printing industry, and it means the edge round here. Normally it applies to, say you're going to have something printed and then it was going to be cut to size, say like a poster or a flyer or something. What they want is a little bit of margin for error, so that as they crop it, you haven't got anything significant round that edge that you will lose. So it's normally 3mm, and one thing you need to bear in mind is that's 3mm on all sides. So don't just add 3mm to the width and the height, because that's only going to do it on one edge, or it's only going to mean 1.5 all the way around, if you see what I mean. So you need to make sure that you add 3mm to each edge. And this company, they didn't really give as much information as I'd have liked, because I had to ask them what the ratio was for the image, and they gave me that, but they didn't give me the precise dimension. So I thought I'll just work 3 by 2 and then I'll be okay. And when I got it back, I realised they cropped more of it than I expected. And because I've had, let me just take the plastic cover so you can see this one better. I think you can see, it's not great light today, that although they didn't crop the leaves either side here, it went right up to the edge, and I really didn't like that. And I got my ruler out and measured these dimensions, and it was actually slightly different from 3 by 2. I can't remember. So obviously the height was right, but the width wasn't. And that's why I'm so glad that I did a sample one and I could realise this. So it happened in several pages, and you can see that I then worked and I added. So if you see these two, you can see these two together, and I might put a still in as well. You can see you've got a nice margin all the way round. So it just doesn't look right like that. They just look too squashed up at the edge and too much of a gap in the middle, and I wouldn't have been happy to have sold that or used it as a gift or anything with that. Like, it depends what image it is. If it's something that's got an all over pattern, it might not have been so important. So what I did is that I did this digitally. So I use a program called Procreate on my iPad, but nearly a lot of image software has the facility to do this. And I used a tool called a cloning tool. And what it does is that it mimics any area that you select. It will mimic that, it does it in pixels unless you're using a vector-based software. It will mimic those exact pixels and it will put it somewhere else. So you select the area you want to copy from, and then you use a sort of paintbrush and you can vary that, and you can vary the size where you want to put the extra. So what I wanted to do was just take more of this background and put it all around the edge. So I changed the size so I knew that I had that extra margin, and I filled in using the clone tool. Now there are one or two pitfalls with this. If you keep repeating it, it can look a little bit blocky, because say I repeated that bit there. If I used that bit where it went over where the colour changes, you'd get a sort of repetition of that pattern, which not only does it not look that nice, it's kind of a real giveaway that it's been digitally enhanced. So I was very careful, and I also used a smudge tool just to recreate it, and I think I've got away with it, because if you look at that bit there, so at the edge here I recreated the green, and here I recreated the grey, and you can see if I hold them side by side, I think you'll agree that's quite convincing. So that's how you would go about making sure you haven't got anything significant at the edge of your image, if that's the size and the format that you're working with. And I'll just show you a few more examples. So on this one, that one's just about okay, but that one's cut that bit off there. So again with that one, I mean, most of these, all these images are things that I've actually got physically, that I've made physically, and then I photographed to make them into these prints. So occasionally, rather than doing the digital side of things, I just had to go and photograph them in a better ratio. But I think this one I did do, let me show you again with that side. So there you can see it's cut off that bit of umbel on the umbellifer, sort of halfway through, and now I've got all of it, and I've got a bit of a margin to the edge. And again, I recreated these bits, and I hope you agree that's quite convincing, and you wouldn't know if I hadn't told you, although looking at it now, the one or two bits there that I could have done a bit better, but I think that's pretty much okay. And that one came out okay. I think again with this one, you can see I've cut off, the leaf is cut off there. So I have reproduced that bit. And another thing, if you've got a big chunk, so that didn't, because this has got such a varied background, it didn't really matter that it looked exactly the same. So I think, I can't quite remember, but I think I took, you can also in your image software do copy and paste. So you can take like a rectangle from one layer and put it on another layer and then blend them together. So I think that's what I did in that case. So that one you can see looks better. And then that one I did do a little bit, but it wasn't, yeah, so I think actually with this one, I did actually draw in the extra bit. So I made the whole image a bit smaller, and I took out that splodge. I took out that mark just so that you'd be able to see that that's the top of that. So they're the two side by side. And again, the side bit, because it's got some stitching here, which I wanted to be in the photograph, I made sure that was further in so that could be seen. And then again with this one, so as you can see, nearly all the images I had to do something with. So again, you can see that cut off that petal there, and I've recreated a bit all around the edge. And on this side I decided, because you can do that digitally, I didn't like that bit of leaf there, so I used the clone tool again and filled that in. And then this image, I thought it just didn't come out very well because it was a cyanotype on fabric, and it can be quite difficult to photograph fabric because you have the weave of the cloth, and so it just doesn't look very sharp, and I just didn't like that. So, but I wanted to include a cyanotype, so I found another image that I got that was a bit crisp. Although it was on fabric, it was a bit crisper, and that's come out much better. That one I don't think I did too much, because that was, actually I did fill a little bit in, because it's more of a sort of, it hasn't got a focal on this one, it's more an all over kind of pattern, but I did just do a little bit more around the edge. I think that end I decided that I wanted to not cut that leaf off, so I did do the same with that one. And then this one, similarly, the teasel had been cut off there, so I have improved it at the edge there. I didn't really mind that the other, I mean, I could have cloned that out as well, but I actually don't mind that's still in there. And then this one I didn't do anything at all to, I think, because I didn't mind that that was actually the whole of the image, I think, because it then went on to another piece. That one I did a little bit too. Yeah, you can see if you look at the top, I didn't like the way just the very tip was cut off, so I did a little bit of cloning around there. And then this one, which is a detail of a bigger piece, I could have left it like that, but again there was this little bit that had been cut off there, so I moved them all over and cloned to put the edge in there. And then I think the last one I just moved it over from the edge there. So I hope that's given you a bit of an idea of how you would go about doing a calendar. So what I'd say is I'll put down the detail. I mean, I do think this is quite a good company, but there are lots. But I would really recommend just getting one, do your design, and if you're going to be doing, if you're just doing one or two for your family, that's fine. But if it's something you might want to do more of, I'll definitely get one done as a sample first. And think about that format, think about what you've got that would fit in that ratio, because nearly all the calendars have this roughly 3x2. And then if you can't find details of the exact dimensions of the image, email the company, phone the company. I should have gone back a second time and found out the exact dimensions. I'll put them, again, I'll put below what they are for this in case you want to use this company. And then watch for the bleed. So remember, you need to add 3mm all the way round where there's nothing that you don't mind if that gets chopped off. It doesn't literally get chopped off because in this case it's being printed, but you do have to have that margin there, just for safety's sake. So I hope those tips have been helpful for you, and if you've got any more questions, please do ask me. And if you're interested in my calendar, it's available now on my website, so I'll put details to that below. And if you're interested in some of the techniques that I used for making the art that I've put into this calendar, I'll link some of the videos and playlists at the end so you can do your own versions. So thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you again soon in my studio.